Dara Treseder is a fascinating case study of what it looks like to climb up the ladder at work. So she started her career in marketing roles at Goldman Sachs and at Apple, and then she got an MBA at Stanford, and you can kind of see like right after that she started this meteoric rise of climbing the corporate ladder. So she was global head of marketing at Apple, she was a CMO at GE, she's a CMO at Carbon, she was a senior vice president at Peloton, and now is the CMO of Autodesk. So just like a really amazing climb. And along the way, she's gotten a host of accolades. She was named the world's most influential CMO by Forbes and was the first Black person to be inducted into the Forbes CMO Hall of Fame. Dara, welcome to Bossy.
Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay, I have a question for you, because when you look at your career, sometimes it's hard for someone on the outside to see what the big kind of turning points were. So I'm curious for you, if you think about raises in title or raises in salary, like what were the big three shifts for you as you look at your career?
Wow, the big three shifts. Okay, we got some time so we could get into it.
Yeah. This episode is sponsored by AT&T Business. Working with them has really made me think about all of the ways that technology impacts my company as a small business owner. My personal team is fully remote. We're spread across 6 different locations, and we really rely a lot on remote working tools to stay connected. We use all kinds of things like payroll services and compliance tools, video conferencing, and project management software. These remote working tools are literally what keeps us all on the same page. Visit att.com/y-att-business to see how they can help you better leverage technology to boss up your business.
I would say the first big shift came when I decided to take a bet on myself.
Yeah.
So I remember I was talking to my husband at the time, and I felt like I was ready to be operating at the executive level. But there were a couple of things that I felt I needed to improve on. I'm a tough critic. You know, I grew up with a Nigerian mom, so there's no participation trophy. You know what I'm saying? If you
right, we win.
You came fourth, and you did not win. You know what I mean? So I have that sort of same approach with myself. And so I identified areas where I said, hey, I could be better at this. I could be stronger at this. And I remember I pulled together a whole presentation because I had to sit my husband down, and I said, we need to invest in an executive coach for me. Okay. And I don't want just any kind. This is the coach I want, this coach who coaches elite CMOs. I was not one at the time.
This is before your MBA or after?
This was after my MBA.
Okay, great.
And I said, I want to, make this investment. And it was an expensive investment because, this is an elite coach.
What kind of expensive are we talking? Give us like a range.
We're talking about elite prices. At the time, what I was going to be paying that coach was about what we were paying for our mortgage. So it was substantial, and so I pulled that together and I made the pitch to my husband and I said, look, I want to take a bet on me. I want us to take a bet on me. And he was incredible. He was like, yes, let's do it. But he was like, he was grilling me like my CFO. He was like, what is the time to pay back on this investment? So we had a time to pay back on the investment. We would say, what is the ROI going to be? And then I started working with a coach. So I always say, you have to believe in yourself. Many times people are looking for someone to believe in them, but they are not willing to believe in themselves. You have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to make the investment. You have to be willing to put in that first big bet on yourself.
We did an episode on like therapists, coaches, like investing in yourself. And this has been, at least for me, like a huge turning point in my own career. So I really resonate with what you're saying. There was a time where I would see some of my other friends that are entrepreneurs just really start passing me by. My friend Danielle just really started like skyrocketing past me in career. And I had to have a real conversation with myself and look at, well, what's the difference between her and you? It's not like that, like you're not smart or anything like that. She's just really investing in coaching and help, and you're not. Because I was so like hoarding of like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't know if I'm going to get an ROI. So I don't know if I was so hesitant to do it. And I'm hearing you say like, no, that was first thing you thought of when you thought about turning point in your career in terms of raises or promotions, was that.
It was exactly that. It was betting on myself, because if you are not going to bet on you, why should anyone else bet on you?
So did that, having a coach, help you get a raise or a role promotion? Like, what was the ROI that you then saw?
What it helped me do was it helped me hone in on a skill set that was critical for me to rise, which is I always had a strong sense of conviction, but I needed to hone in on my courage to act on my conviction. So when I look back on my career, I don't have any regrets when I trusted my instincts and I moved forward with my conviction. I don't even like to use the word regrets, because I think of everything as a lesson. I think of everything as a lesson. Hey, there are fun lessons and there are hard lessons, but they're all
But
lessons.
they were lessons, yeah.
They were lessons. And when I think about those lessons, I did not like very much. Those lessons, I wish I could have skipped that class, right?
But you needed it.
I needed it. And that was because I did not trust my convictions, and I did not move forward with courage. So part of what I worked with my coach on was honing in my courage.
What was one thing you were maybe not being as courageous about that you could have been more courageous about?
So one of the things that I was not being very courageous about at the time was telling like my bosses or my superiors when I disagreed with something that they were doing. You know, I'm sort of like, I had that tendency to, I like peace, I like harmony. And so when I felt like we were going down a path and I could see all of the issues.
We're going to crash.
Exactly. I was like, we are about to crash, y'all. Like, we need to get out of this vehicle right now. But I needed, so that was one of the things I worked with my coach on. And I realized what was the underlying thing was fear, right? Because there is a line. Above the line is trust, and below the line is fear. And when we are afraid, we hold not only ourselves back, we hold our teams back.
Yeah.
And we hold back performance. And so one of the things that I had to do was I had to rise above that line, and I had to deepen trust in myself, trust in my convictions, trust in my expertise, trust in my experience to be able to have the courage to speak the truth.
So let's say that your boss comes to you, and maybe we can kind of look at this from like a perspective of what advice you might give to someone who's in their career. So let's say, hypothetical scenario, your boss comes to you and they're like, I think here's the project that I want you to be kind of focused on. Here's the direction that we want to go in. And you were like, ooh, I don't think that's the direction we should go in at all. What do you say? Like, if you muster up your courage to say something, so you've got the courage part, but what do you actually say when you are ready to talk?
Yeah, so right now I'm the CMO at Autodesk, right? Autodesk, our software is used to design and make anything, whether it's the phone in your hand, the building you're in, or the movies and games you might love and enjoy.
Right.
So I'm going to use a real example because I like us to break it practical. Let's make it real.
Okay.
So recently, I was having a conversation with our CEO and our COO about one of the things that we want to announce or we want to launch.
Okay.
And
it's a marketing thing.
It was a marketing thing.
Okay.
It was a marketing proposal, and they were talking about what they want, and we were talking about timing and what we were going to do, and there was an idea to do it a certain way, and I said, hey, I think we need to do it this way, and we need to decouple these two things. Now, because I learned a very long time ago, right? This isn't my first, second, or third CMO job. Like, right. I'm a veteran CMO. Like, I'm confident to do it. But earlier in my career, right. I would have been hesitant to say anything. I would have just said, okay, let's just go do this. Even though I knew that there were going to be issues, I would have just said, with resilience and grit, we're just going to get it done. And sometimes there's a space for that. But there are times when we need to say, hey, actually, I don't agree with that. Or could we try this other perspective? Or hey, I see this challenge that maybe you haven't considered. Or hey, have you even considered this? By the way, that was one of the first things I did was ask a question. Because initially when I was trying to build that courage, before I could, now I can say, hey, I don't agree with this, let's look at this. But before I got to that place, one of the first things I would do would ask a question. Like, hey, thank you for asking me to do this. I just wanted to ask, had you considered this?
Yeah.
And that would always open Because many times the answer would be, actually, no, I hadn't thought about that. Or
Yeah.
they would say, yes, I had thought about that, but now that you mention it, maybe we should consider this. So asking questions and bringing in curiosity is a great way for having the courage to speak your truth and to speak your conviction.
I love that. I think one of my favorite ways to like tell a boss or tell a manager that I want to go in a different direction, it's taking this concept of questions, but almost playing dumb. Like I might go like, oh, I'm actually not sure, like how does this tie in to this other initiative that we have? Like they seem like they're kind of disjointed, so like maybe you can kind of help me bridge the gap. Now I might like know what they probably think, but I'm kind of intentionally acting like I don't know, because it opens up the door, to your point, to that conversation. And then there's space for me to say, oh, well, I actually think like another connection point might be this, and to sneak in my idea. But if you like create the openness with the question, is what I'm hearing you say.
Exactly. You create the openness with the question, you create the openness with curiosity. And one thing that I'll say is we always need to learn, one of the biggest lessons that I learned as a leader is not treating people how I want to be treated, but treating them how they want to be treated. And by the way, this applies not only when you're managing people, but also as you're managing up with your bosses, with your peers. And so this is another thing. When you have to tell somebody, when you have to, provide critical feedback or suggest a different perspective, you need to understand what is the best way that this person will receive that, right? For some people, it might be asking a question. For some, it might actually just be being direct. For some, it might be, saying, hey, okay, I like that you suggested this, but could we have a plan B? So you have to figure out what is the best way for me to get my idea heard, because people don't hear what we say, right? They hear what they want to hear.
That's
so
right.
We need to make sure that we are speaking in a way where they're not just listening to us, but they're truly hearing and understanding what we're saying.
This is something I was recently talking to a friend about. He was showing me a pitch deck that he had made, and he was pitching like potential customers for something. And he asked me for feedback on the deck. And I said, it feels a little bit about you and about what you want as opposed to what's in it for them. And I would just kind of reorganize it a little bit to be more centered on what's in it for them. And I see this a lot in entrepreneurship, and I see it a lot in people navigating their career, and I see it in myself because I sometimes make this mistake and do this as well, where I'm thinking about what I want to get out of something. And instead of positioning it as what does my manager, what does my boss, like how is this going to help them get where they want to go? Because every time you can wrap, like if you have a different idea than your boss, if you can like wrap it in what's in it for them, I find that I am much more successful when the positioning is like, well, I know that you have this goal. And so because of this goal, the reason I think we should go this way is because it helps us get to that goal. Right? It's not like I just want to do my idea. It's like all positioned about them.
That's exactly right. At the end of the day, I think if you start with that what's in it for them mindset, that's a really great way. And you just have to remember, it's not about what you're trying to do. It's about what they need, what they want, what they're trying to accomplish. And when you can package it in that way, your feedback turns into a gift.
It's a gift. They're like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
We were talking about different turning points of your career and getting a salary bump or a raise in title. So you were saying one of those turning points was you investing in a coach. What was maybe the second one that really kind of was a new raise or something different that happened?
And the second one was what I just said about, learning how to treat people how they want to be treated. Because what that did was it unlocked my potential as a leader. In terms of, I became a leader that could sort of engender high devotion and high performance, because all of a sudden my team realized that, oh, she's not just about herself, right? But she's about me. She's about what I need. And guess what? People show up for people, right? So when I know that my manager's about me, I'm about her too, right?
Yeah.
When I know that my manager is about me, I'm going to make sure that I'm also helping them too. And then it's not just a job. I'm not just clocking in and clocking out. I'm not just doing what I need to get done, but I'm doing it with passion. I'm doing it with joy. I'm doing it because I want to be doing this, right? I'm excited to be doing this. I feel honored to be doing this. And so switching my leadership style and really putting people at the center of it And by the way, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm definitely not perfect, but one of the things I'm passionate about is high devotion. And by the way, my devotion does not, end when people stop working for me. Like I have people who work for me, they text me later on, hey, I'm now going on to this, and I'm still providing that support and advice. And I think when you are someone who engenders that level of devotion, or you put in that devotion into other people, the standards rise. High devotion brings about high standards in performance.
Ooh, I don't think I've ever heard someone explicitly talking about and thinking about how do I create devotion in my role. And that, I think, whether you're CMO or you're a junior level marketer or whatever your role is, how do I get devotion from the people I work with, my manager? That's actually a really interesting lens I don't think I've heard before.
Yeah, and I have to give all credit to this Harvard Business School professor, Frances Fry, because this is something that she teaches that I learned from her. And it's really incredible. When we think about how we increase performance, we need to be thinking about the devotion we are engendering and how we are devoting ourselves to other people.
Yeah. Okay, when I think about early in my career, there were a couple people, they were mainly women, who I saw doing this particular move that I want to ask you about. Because the move was they would work at a company for maybe 2-3 years, and then they would move to another company. And every time they moved to another company, there was kind of a bump in title, and it contrasted the advice that I had heard from my mother and my grandmother, for example, which is to stay at a company for a while and put in your time at a company. They were really moving back and forth between different companies, and that was the best mechanism for them to climb the ladder. They were finding it was harder to stay at one job and climb the ladder, but moving and bumping around was easier. Have you found this to be helpful in your own career? Do you think about that as a strategy at all?
So I don't think about that as a strategy, but I do have a philosophy.
Okay, great.
My philosophy is there's a time to bloom where you're planted, and there's a time when you need to go to grow. And you do not want to confuse the two.
Ooh.
So you don't want to confuse the two, because when you are planted somewhere, you need to bloom. There needs to be fruit, because that fruit is what people is gonna help you actually have a long-term success.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're not trying to work for 10 years, 15 years. We want to have a long-term career, a long-term success. And so you have to be playing the long game. And so you need to make sure that when you're planted in a place where you can bloom, you stay to bloom. You stay to bloom, you bloom, you get the fruit, you get those receipts. And then, when the sunshine is gone, when the soil is lacking in nutrients, when there is no more water, and you are withering away, then it's time to go to grow. And so that is a philosophy that I apply. So for me, it's not, there are times when it might take you 10 years to bloom where you're planted, right? And that is a worthy investment of 10 years. There are times when it might, you might be in a situation where it's not, the values aren't aligned, things aren't aligned, and you need to go to grow a lot quicker. So I don't really believe in putting any time frames on things.
Yeah.
I will stay and bloom I will stay where I'm planted as long as I'm blooming. I love, working at Autodesk, a company that's helping design and make a better world for all. I'm I love this. Today I could be putting on my construction hat, have to find my practical shoes because I'm going to a construction site. Tomorrow I'm talking with creators about how they're using AI to design and make, movies of the future. I'm excited, right? I'm blooming, I'm learning, but I've certainly been in situations where it's hey, I woke up and I was wow, there is no sunshine. I'm someone who carries the sunshine with me a lot. And when I wake up and I'm struggling to find the sunshine, I feel like I'm not learning anymore, or maybe there's a conflict between my values and my principles and what's happening, and I'm okay, this might be a time where it's time for me to go to grow. But I think that success happens when you stay where you're planted to bloom. And when there is no more blooming happening when you go to grow, but don't confuse the two. And I think one of the things I'll also say is let's not compare ourselves with ourselves, because one of the things that I think can happen sometimes is we're out here, oh, well, this person just did this, or should I do this? It's we're not our parents and we're not our friends. You know what I mean? So we don't need to stay at a place for 50 years because our parents did that. And at the same time, we don't need to be like our friends who leave in every 6 months. We need to figure out what is right for us and trust our instincts.
One of the things that I see is tricky for myself in this concept that you're saying of like stay and then and go at the right times around what you're getting out of the role. One of the things that's tricky for me about this is I am a very optimistic person, right? So I can generally always find a way, a project I'm excited about, a thing that like, oh, if I worked with this person and brought this person together, I could bring my idea together and bring it to the market. Like I very much view things that way. But I also think that the other side of that, the downside of that, is because I always see a possibility, we may no longer be in bloom season overall, but I'm forcing the bloom, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I also can see I have friends that are a little bit different in personality, and they're looking for someone to give them the project at work. And there's not a lot of bloom because they're not stepping into a lot of their power at work. So they're not adding their own fertilizer to it. And so some of these things, like how you approach it, also changes what the season is. And I'm curious if you have advice on navigating and knowing the difference between if it's you getting in the way versus just the opportunity is no longer right.
Yeah, that's a really, really good a question and insight. And I would say signs to know when it's you getting in the way.
Okay, good. Yeah, great.
Signs to know when it's you getting in the way. If you are not hearing no, you're getting in the way. Because that means you're not pushing. You're not asking. You're not trying to do anything. You're just sitting there complacent. Ooh. I like to say no is a suggestion. It's a suggestion. You can act on it or you could respectfully decline. But if you're not hearing no, it means you're not pushing the boundaries enough.
Like you pitch your idea and your boss says no.
Pitch something. Like you need to hear, so you're going to hear a no for something, right? If you're not hearing any no's, then you might be the one getting in your own way by not giving yourself permission. Because if you're not hearing any no's, let me tell you who's not giving you permission. It is you. You are not giving yourself permission to be excellent. You are not giving yourself permission to progress. You are not giving yourself permission to show initiative. If you are not hearing no, the person standing in the way is you.
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. And the framing of pitching is something that we often talk about from an entrepreneurship lens. But what I hear you talking about is entrepreneurship, right? Like you work at a company, but you're still pitching ideas. And if you can't remember the last time you pitched an idea and got a no, that's when it's you, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, exactly. Like if you can't remember the last time you said something to someone and they say, hey, Dara, I know you said this, but I don't agree, then it's you. Because that means you're not bringing anything to the table, right? You're just out here having lunch and chilling. Right, you are not being proactive. So if you're in that situation, then that is you. But if you're in a situation where you are always putting things out there, right, and you're only hearing no, if you are only hearing no, it might be a time for you to go to grow. Because if you're only hearing no, that you're hitting a ceiling, right? If you're never hearing no, you need to dig in because you still have some blooming to do. And if you're only hearing no, then that might be the time for you to go to grow.
Okay. I'm processing all this. This is really good and a really good framework for thinking about like your career. Talk to me about something that you pitched that maybe earlier in your career as you sort of done a climb up. Tell it to me about something that you pitched where you got a no to it.
So early in my career, I was leading and driving really like kind of demand generation and growth.
Yeah.
Right. And I had this perspective. At the time, it wasn't popular. Now I think everyone gets it. But I had this sort of idea of how you could connect brand and demand, and how that could really drive outsized performance. So I was pitching an idea to do something that we hadn't done before in the organization that I was in, that was more of a brand thought leadership thing.
That might drive demand, but people tend to think they're
demand, but it wasn't direct. Like you couldn't be like, okay, well, how many people came to this? It was going to be more of a brand thought leadership play. And I remember, I was getting ready to go pitch it. To my head of sales and the head of the business. I was running marketing for the business at the time. I wasn't a CMO yet, but I was, running marketing for that group. And so the person that was, the leader was a lot more senior than I was. So I was sort of pulling all of this together, how I was going to sell them on it. It wasn't something we had done before. And it was also women focused, which was very different. At the time, there were a lot of women who, we didn't have a lot of women who were investing in this space that we were in. And I wanted to pitch this brand idea that was going to really focus on like women investors. And I said, there's such few women investors, and many of them don't even know each other. So this would be an event where we would bring all these women together. It wasn't, now it's like, okay, this happens. But back then, nobody was doing anything like this. So it was like,
and I think the thing that sounds particularly risky in your pitch is that people are looking for you to do something like demand generation direct. There's an ROI exactly, and you're pitching something that's a little bit more brand marketing, and so you might get no's just with the idea because it's kind of you're trying to zig when everybody else zags in the approach.
Not only was I zagging, but I was zagging. You know what I'm saying? It's like, hey, not only are we doing brand, but now we're talking about, okay, a women focus. What are we doing here? But so when I first pitched the idea, the answer was no.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, I'm going to come back. And they were like, sure, we know. They already knew me. So they were like, we know you're going to come back. Because I was like, I give every idea 3 chances. So if I come to you with one, if you tell me no, I'll ask why. I'll get the feedback. I'll come back to address those concerns. And if you still say no, I'll ask why. And I'll come back. And I give everything 3 chances. So I went back. And I did some more work. And what I did was, I had to connect it a little bit more closely to some of the economic research we had. So I tied it stronger to the business. So it was still the brand, it was still the women's idea, but there was a stronger business connection. So I came back and the answer was still no. Because they were like, okay, well, how much are we going to spend? We haven't done this before. So
were they volunteering to tell you the why, or did you have to push to get the why?
They did not tell me why. So when they said no, I asked, can you tell me why? And so finally, because I had come back the second time, and then, my sales leader knew me, so she knew I was going to come back a third time. So she said, Dara, she said, you know what? If you could do this for this budget, and she gave me the budget. It was the smallest little budget. And I said, if I could do it for this budget, she said, if you could do it for this budget. So I went back and I had to rethink my whole idea and approach. Because now I had to go, we ended up doing it at this museum, but I had to basically sell the museum on letting us use the space for free.
Yeah, to get it in the budget.
My whole budget, exactly, because my budget was just going to be, it was going to be like just on the food and the drinks, and I had to figure out how I could convince the author to come and speak for free. Yeah. So that they would have visibility and they would have all these women. Yes, girl. I was able, so it taught me the power. I learned a bit, no is a suggestion. No is a suggestion, and I think many times in our life, in our careers, when we hear no, we hear it as no. And actually, no just means try harder sometimes. Sometimes no just means not yet. Sometimes no just means not right now. And so it is for us to figure out, okay, what is this suggestion really?
Move the Rubik's Cube around to get it right.
Is this not yet because it's not fully baked? So I just need to do a little more cooking. Or is this a not right now because the timing isn't right? So I just need to bring back this idea in a different time. Or is this a solid no? Right? No is a suggestion.
My number one favorite line to get to a yes is, what would need to be true in order for this to be a yes? Because what it does, and I'm like the third try, first we can ask why. On the third try, if I need to ask it differently, I will change my wording to what would need to be true. Because what it does is it gets the other person creative, like if I'm the only one creative brainstorming, it gets the other person to creative brainstorm with me. Well, what would need to be true is it would need to fit in this budget, just like she did. But that's my last ditch question. What would need to be true for this to work? And typically people are like, oh, and they just tell you the thing, and it's workable.
Yeah, exactly. It's usually like, what would make you approve this? Like, what would make you even try this? And they'll be like, well, maybe if you did this. And you're like, all right, well, let's go then. And it gives you that opportunity. I love what you said about it takes it from being just my idea to an our idea, right? And when you can move from the me to the we, all of a sudden, you're starting to build allyship that can help transform and take an idea forward.
Can you remember the first time you asked for a raise?
Girl, this is the one thing that I am terrible at, asking for a raise.
Okay, say more.
I still am not good at this. It comes back to just, I think, like my being in my immigrant upbringing and just sort of, it took a lot for me to, I did not ask for a raise, honestly, until I was already a CMO. And I asked for a raise not even in my first CMO job, but it was after I had been a CMO.
Okay.
And I became a veteran CMO that I learned. And part of it was just benchmarking. It was like getting the data and saying, hey, what are my peers being paid? What am I being paid for my size of company? And is this, and based on my value in the market, what do I command? What price do I command in the market? And having an understanding of that. But it's interesting. One thing that I will say that someone said to me early on in my career that made a difference for me is there is a time in your career where you want to optimize for your salary or your compensation, and there's a time when you don't. And early in your career is not the time to optimize for compensation. Early in your career, you need to optimize for sponsors, for opportunities, for learning, because that's the time when you could take on that big, you want to optimize to build the credibility, to build the resume. So if you're optimizing, you're going to make $10,000 more, but you're working for a boss that's not going to let you do anything. How is that going to help you build your skills? How is that going to help you? So someone gave me that advice early in my career. That was really helpful for me. And obviously, as I've progressed in my career, now it's like, okay, well, it got to a point where as I got more senior, where it was like, okay, this is the time to optimize for compensation. But even then, even till today, I'll say compensation for me is a factor. It's a factor. It's not the factor.
Yeah.
And I think everybody is so different, right? So everyone, this is just for me. Everyone, you have to figure out. I have friends that are like, girl, I don't know what you're talking about. For me, it's A, B, C, D factor. I have friends who are like that. And hey, we all need to be honest with ourselves about what is the most important thing to us. For me, I need to have passion for the company that I'm working with. I love Autodesk. If you find myself, he's like, yeah, my mom is working for Autodesk. Their software helps you design and make a better world. I live it. I love my job. I love what I do, and to me, that's really important. So if someone came to me and they're like, hey, we're going to pay you extra to do this, I'm going to be like, well, what am I going to be doing? And if it's not something that, I'm not interested. So for me, that passion is really important. The people are also really important. I care a lot about, in these jobs, being a C-level executive, I'm spent a lot of my time at work. I spend a lot of my time working. I need to like the people I'm working with. I need to enjoy the work that I'm doing. So the people matter a lot to me. And then of course, I'm not in a nonprofit job, right? So I do care about my compensation, but I would say the people and the purpose matter a lot too. And I think that's just something that people should think about. As you look at any equation, yes. The
whole picture.
The paper matters, the money matters, the compensation matters, but also how is this helping you in your purpose? Do you feel a sense of fulfillment, right? Is this bringing you joy and peace? How is working in this job allowing you to be the you want to be and allowing you to show up how you want to show up? I think that stuff is important too.
The first time that I asked for a raise, I remember the feedback that I got. I remember the scenes. I remember the room we were in. I remember my boss at the time, Bryn Zaccaro is her name, and she was like, oh, that's not how you ask for a raise. She just straight up told me, she was like, that's not how you do it, girl. That was cute, but let me tell you how to do it, which I am so great. I'm so grateful for that advice. It helped me a lot. But I think I went in and I was like, here's what I think I should be paid and what I think I'm worth it. And she was like, okay, if you were doing this again, you should have started with listing all the stuff that you've crushed and contributed.
Exactly.
And ideally align it to the stuff that I care about and I'm working on that helped me. Come in with a list. And even better than that is we would have been having regular check-ins where you were making sure that I knew and was aware of those things. and tie the raise that you should have to the specific things that you have done and how you've moved the needle. And I don't think like I knew that that was how the conversation should go. Like I wasn't thinking about that. And now if I fast forward, I'm very good at like there's an element of like telling, it's a humble brag about what you've done, right? And make sure that people know. And there's a little bit of like withholding. There's almost like a kind of like a dating component in this here where like, hey, if my boss, for example, keeps giving me new things and like new directions to go in and I keep taking on responsibility, I might in a packaged conversation say, here's how I've been crushing it in this and like how we've been driving this forward. And I really would love to be able to move this needle. And I think we can maybe talk about expanding the role so that I can continue doing that. But here are the things that I'm working on now and what I want to be working on next aligned to your goals. But I'm intentionally taking that thing that I'm being asked to expand, but I maybe don't have capacity to do, and like framing it inside of all the things that I'm already crushing. And that then creates these like regular check-ins about like, oh, okay, like, are we now ready for me to now step into this new thing? Because like, if we are, we can talk about expanding the capacity. And then we end up in the raise conversation, but I have to like intentionally withhold. Otherwise, people will just keep asking you to do more and more, and you kind of lose all of your capacity to perform with a level head as well. And it kind of touches on just like demonstrating your value. So I want to talk to you about, and this is maybe like last question I have for you around kind of workplace and climbing the ladder. How do you demonstrate your value and what you've done thus far and how great you're doing? Maybe your boss isn't paying attention to every little detail that you do. Like, what does that look like for you?
So I would say, I think the first thing is do the work with excellence. So that's number one, right? You can't demonstrate value if value does not exist. So let's first of all, step one to demonstrating your value is create value. That's step one.
And it has to be the value your boss cares about, not just what you care about. Yeah.
Create recognized value. I like to put the recognized there because it can't be value you think is valuable, but your boss is like, I don't know who asked you to do all these things. Right. But these are not important things. So you need to create recognized value. That's step one. You are adding value where the business needs. At the end of the day, businesses, they're not families. This is not a family. If it's a family, okay, we're going to let Uncle George, who nobody likes at the cookout. No. This is a team. If we throw you the ball and you drop the ball, you are on the bench. You know what I mean? So you have to create recognized value. That's number one. I think.
And you might know it's recognized because it makes your boss look good at their job.
And you just ask. It's like you ask. If you aren't sure, and I actually like to say you want to make sure it is unambiguous. So you actually need to do what I like to call an impression check. Okay. So that means I would come to you and I would say, Tara, it seems to me that you care about women crushing life. I would like to check in with you on that. Is that accurate? And then you would say, yes, I actually care a lot about this. And then, you want to do an impression check to confirm that value is indeed
right, which might look like, it seems like this quarter or this year, your objective is this. Is that
these
right?
These are my objectives. I want to confirm with you that these are the right objectives. I always, at the beginning of any fiscal year, any quarter, sit down with your boss and tell your boss, here's what I'm working on. I want to confirm with you that these are the things that you want me to be focused on.
That are going to move the needle, yeah.
Because you don't know how many times your boss said something for you at the beginning of the year. You didn't check, and at the end of the year, you're writing your review, and your boss says, I don't care about any of these things. Because things change. The world changed. AI came on the scene. COVID happened. Things happen. So
tariffs,
it's really important.
And all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. So it's really important that you are staying close and that you are constantly impression checking. Impression checking is not a set it and forget it thing, but it is a constant, continuous exercise. So first, you create recognized value. Two, you constantly check in to confirm. And one of the things that's really important too is you want to confirm that, am I on track? Am I off track? Am I exceeding expectations? You want to be clear. Right? Because if you might tell your boss might be like, you're on track. And you're like, well, I felt like I was extended. They're like, no, this is the bar. You are on track. It is good for you to know. You want to know now. You don't want that, because then you can say, okay, what would exceeding look like to you? And then all of a sudden, you're not waiting till the end of the year right? You are having a conversation where you understand what exceeding looks like to your boss, and then you could decide to opt in or opt out. You might be like, hey, I'm planning my wedding this year. I'm just on track. Or you might be like, I want to do more. I have more to give. I want to exceed. Let me take that additional step forward.
And when
So
you do
wanna-
exceed, it makes it really clear to your boss. Like now
It
they
makes it
know
very
because
clear.
you talked about it. It was clear. Then you came back. You said, I did this.
Exactly.
What do you think now? And then there's when it's time to have a conversation about a raise or a role expansion, there's no ambiguity.
There is no ambiguity. One of the things, I do not like surprises, and I don't like to give surprises. The workplace surprises is not something I'm interested in. And so that allows you to remove that ambiguity and to have what is so important, which is clarity. Clarity is so important. Clarity is kind. Clarity is great. Clarity is good, right? And if you're not on track, it's great for you to check in, because your boss can be like, you know what? For this thing, we are not on track. And then you could say, and then you can ask your boss, how can I get this on track? How can you help me? All of a sudden, we're having the conversation before we need to have the conversation.
And it's a we thing. Now they're bought in, and it's a team
now a
effort.
we thing. It's not me versus you. It's us versus this issue. It's us versus, hey, I wanted us to move the needle here. This has not moved, right? I wanted us to increase sales here. Sales has not increased. What are we going to do about it? Right? And then we are all of a sudden working together. So that's the second thing. So first of all, make sure you're creating recognized value. 2, make sure you're constantly checking in to confirm, right, that it is on, whether it's on track, off track, or exceeding expectations. And then the third thing that I think that is really important to do to demonstrate your value is to communicate, which means, so you created the value, you confirmed that you are actually on track or exceeding expectations. And then the third piece is to communicate about it. So you want to make sure, because your boss has a gazillion things on their mind. They're managing probably not only you, other people too. So you want to make sure that you are staying top of mind for them. Whose job is that? That's your job. It's your turn. Next time you have time with them, you say, hey, I just want to say, again, thank you for the opportunity to work on this project at the beginning of the year. I just love your mentorship throughout the year as we have progressed this. We were supposed to increase and grow this business by 10%. We are now growing by 20%. I'm so proud of the work our team is doing, and I'm just so excited. And all of a sudden, you just first of all, you made your boss feel good, because you told your boss, look at how you helped me and add value to my life. You also told your boss, you told me 10%, I did 20%, so that's 2.
Don't forget.
I exceeded exactly. I 2x'd the goal. And now all of a sudden, you've communicated to your boss in a way your boss can understand and can take action. So you want to create value, you want to check in to confirm, and then you want to communicate what you have achieved.
Dara, it is really obvious to me after having this conversation. Like when I see your resume and the ladder climb that you've done, I get it. It is clear now because you're so aware, not just of like what you're putting out into the world in your own work, but how you work with a team and how you do that as a we and from a we context. And I think people listening to this and watching to this are going to get a whole lot out of the tips that you shared. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just love that we're like in our green today. We're just blooming and enjoying
It's blooming.
it.
It's giving spring is coming, summer is coming vibes. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me. What a treat.